Because protein is such a vital constituent of all organs, it's no wonder so many people are preoccupied with making sure they get enough dietary protein. Dieters, athletes, exercisers, and vegetarians all may worry that they don't get enough protein in their diet and that they need to supplement with protein bars, shakes, or protein supplements to perform better and optimize their health. This chapter will address some of these concerns. Read through the slide to see the different types of vegetarians, but a common theme with vegetarians is that they do not eat meat. Vegans, on the other hand, do not eat any animal product or byproduct. People choose a vegetarian diet for many reasons, including religious beliefs, health concerns, ecological and animal welfare concerns, or simply because they just don't like the way meat tastes. It's been practiced for centuries, and during the 1990s, scientific evidence accumulated that supported that diets consisting of too much red meat were linked to chronic disease. This prompted many health organizations to issue statements endorsing the health benefits of plant-based diets. The federal government was no longer able to ignore the health benefits of plant-based diets and consequently released the 2010 dietary guidelines in which Americans were challenged to eat a more plant-based diet. They also stated that a vegetarian-style way of eating improved health outcomes, lower levels of obesity, a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, and overall lower total mortality. Whether you choose to consume protein from animal or plant-based sources, an important factor to consider is the entire nutrient package of the food. Protein is of utmost importance and is present in every single cell. Protein makes up about 20% of the human body. Proteins are called the workhorses of life as they provide the body with structure and perform a vast array of functions. Protein is necessary for proper immune system function, digestion, hair and nail growth, and it's involved in numerous other bodily functions. It's estimated that more than 100,000 different proteins exist within the human body. Proteins, simply put, are macromolecules composed of amino acids. Amino acids are commonly called protein's building blocks. They're crucial for the nourishment, renewal, and continuance of life. Proteins contain the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen just as carbohydrates and lipids do, but proteins are the only macronutrient that contains nitrogen. In each amino acid, the elements are arranged into a specific conformation around a carbon center. Each amino acid consists of a central carbon atom connected to a side chain, a hydrogen, a nitrogen-containing amino group, a carboxylic acid group, hence the name amino acid. Amino acids differ from each other by which specific side chain is bonded to the carbon center. This is sometimes referred to as the remainder group, aka R group. All amino acids have a carbon center. The arrangement of the elements around that carbon center is the same for all amino acids, only that side chain differs. The side chain of an amino acid, sometimes called the R group, can be as simple as one hydrogen bonded to the carbon center, or as complex as a 6-carbon ring bonded to the carbon center. Although each side chain of the 20 amino acids is unique, there are some chemical likenesses among them. Therefore, they can be classified into 4 different groups. These are nonpolar, polar, acidic, and basic. Nonpolar amino acids. The side chains of these amino acids are long carbon chains or carbon rings, making them bulky. They're hydrophobic, meaning they repel water. Polar amino acids have side chains that make them hydrophilic, meaning they're water soluble. With acidic amino acids, the side chains are negatively charged hydrophilic amino acids. With basic amino acids, the side chains are positively charged hydrophilic amino acids. Amino acids are also classified based on nutritional aspects. There are 20 different amino acids, and we require all of them to make the many different proteins found throughout the body. 11 of the 20 amino acids are called non-essential amino acids because the body can make them. However, 9 of the 20 amino acids are called essential amino acids because the body either cannot make them at all or in sufficient amounts. These must be obtained from the diet. There are some instances where the body can't make enough of some of the non-essential amino acids, and therefore they will need to be supplemented. These are called conditionally essential amino acids. Notice here the essential amino acids are listed to the left. The non-essential acids are listed to the right. The essential amino acids are the 9 amino acids that the body cannot make at all or make in enough quantities, so we must get those from the diet. Those to the right with an asterisk are the non-essential amino acids that are sometimes called conditionally essential amino acids when certain conditions apply, making it impossible for the body to make enough of those amino acids. Read through the next few slides about different types of proteins. The next few slides focus on how the body builds proteins from amino acids. The building of a protein consists of a complex series of chemical reactions that can be summarized into 3 basic steps: transcription, translation, and protein folding. The first step in making a protein from amino acids is the transcription or copying phase. This is where DNA is copied into RNA. Step 2 is translation. The RNA will then instruct the cells to gather all the necessary amino acids and add them to the growing protein chain in a very specific order. The decoding of genetic information to synthesize a protein is the central foundation of modern biology. During translation, each amino acid is connected to the next amino acid by a special chemical bond called a peptide bond. The third step in constructing a protein from amino acids involves folding it into its correct shape. Specific amino acid sequences contain all of the information necessary to spontaneously fold into a particular shape. A change in the amino acid sequence will cause a change in the shape of the protein. Each protein in the human body will differ in its amino acid sequence and consequently its shape. A protein made with an incorrectly placed amino acid may not function properly, and this can sometimes cause disease. Read through the next few slides regarding protein organization. One thing to note is that proteins are similar to carbs and lipids in that they are all polymers of simple repeating units. However, proteins are much more structurally complex. Proteins are made up of amino acids that are different from one another, unlike carbohydrates, which have identical repeating units. A protein's structure will influence its nutritional quality. Large fibrous protein structures are much more difficult to digest than smaller proteins, and some proteins, such as keratin, are indigestible. Because digestion of some fibrous proteins is incomplete, not all of the amino acids are absorbed and available for the body to utilize, thereby decreasing their nutritional value. So just because you eat a complete protein doesn't mean that the body is able to absorb those amino acids. In addition to having many vital functions within the body, proteins perform different roles in our foods by adding certain functional qualities to them. Protein provides food with structure and texture. Cooked proteins add some color to foods as the amino acid group binds with carbohydrates and produces a brown pigment. The next few slides regard protein denaturation. This refers to the physical changes that take place in a protein that's exposed to abnormal conditions in the environment, and these include heat, acid, high salt concentrations, alcohol, etc. When a protein denatures, its folded structure will unravel and it will become just a long strand of amino acids again. Because proteins' function is dependent on their shape, a denatured protein is no longer functional. When you eat food, the body's digestive system breaks down the protein into individual amino acids, which are absorbed and used by cells to build other proteins and a few other macromolecules, such as DNA. In the example of eating an egg, unless you're eating it raw, the first step in egg digestion involves chewing. The teeth begin the mechanical breakdown of the large egg pieces into smaller pieces that can be swallowed. The salivary glands provide some saliva to aid swallowing and the passage of the partially mashed egg through the esophagus. The mashed egg pieces enter the stomach through the esophageal sphincter. The stomach releases gastric juices containing hydrochloric acid and the enzyme pepsin, which initiate the breakdown of the protein. The acidity of the stomach facilitates the unfolding of the proteins that still retain part of their three-dimensional structure after cooking and helps break down the protein aggregates formed during cooking. Pepsin, which is secreted by the cells that line the stomach, dismantles the protein chains into smaller and smaller fragments. Egg proteins are large globular molecules and their chemical breakdown requires time and mixing. The powerful mechanical stomach contractions churn the partially digested protein into a more uniform mixture called chyme. Protein digestion in the stomach takes a longer time than carbohydrate digestion, but a shorter time than fat digestion. Eating a high-protein meal increases the amount of time required to sufficiently break down the meal in the stomach. Food remains in the stomach longer, making you feel full longer. The stomach empties the chyme containing the broken down egg pieces into the small intestine. This is where the majority of protein digestion occurs. The pancreas secretes digestive juices that contain more enzymes that further break down the protein fragments. The cells that line the small intestine release additional enzymes that finally break apart the smaller protein fragments into the individual amino acids. The muscle contractions of the small intestine mix and propel the digested proteins to the absorption sites. In the lower parts of the small intestine, the amino acids are transported from the intestinal lumen through the intestinal cells to the blood. This movement of individual amino acids requires special transport proteins and the cellular energy molecule ATP. Once the amino acids are in the blood, they're transported to the liver. As with other macronutrients, the liver is the checkpoint for amino acid distribution and any further breakdown of amino acids, which is very minimal. Recall that amino acids contain nitrogen, so further catabolism of amino acids releases nitrogen-containing ammonia. Because ammonia is toxic, the liver transforms it into urea, which is then transported to the kidney and excreted in the urine. Urea is a molecule that contains 2 nitrogen atoms and is highly soluble in water. Just as some plastics can be recycled to make new products, amino acids are recycled to make new proteins. All cells in the body continually break down proteins and build new ones, a process referred to as protein turnover. Every day, over 250 grams of protein in your body are dismantled and 250 grams of new protein are built. To form these new proteins, amino acids from food and those from protein destruction are placed into a pool. Though it's not a literal pool, when an amino acid is required to build another protein, it can be acquired from the additional amino acids that exist within the body. Amino acids aren't used just to build proteins. They're also used to build other biological molecules containing nitrogen, such as DNA and RNA, and to some extent to produce energy. It's critical to maintain amino acid levels within this cellular pool by consuming high-quality proteins in the diet, or the amino acids needed for building new proteins will be obtained by increasing protein destruction from other tissues within the body, especially the muscle. Thus, the body doesn't store protein as it does with carbohydrates, as glycogen in the muscles and the liver, and lipids, as triglycerides in adipose tissue. Many people, like athletes, exercisers, and dieters, forget that protein has many functions in the body and tend to associate protein with just building muscle tissue. However, as you look at the slide, you can see that protein has numerous functions in the body. More than 100 different structural proteins have been discovered in the human body, but the most abundant by far is collagen, which makes up about 6% of total body weight. Collagen makes up 30% of bone tissues and comprises large amounts of tendons, ligaments, cartilage, skin, and muscle. Collagen is a strong, fibrous protein made up of mostly glycine and proline amino acids. Within its quaternary structure, 3 protein strands twist around each other like a rope, and then these collagen ropes overlap with others. This highly ordered structure is even stronger than steel fibers of the same size. Collagen makes bones strong but flexible. Collagen fibers in the skin's dermis provide it with structure, and the accompanying elastin protein fibrils make it flexible. The closely packed collagen fibrils in tendons and ligaments allow for synchronous mechanical movements of bones and muscle and the ability of these tissues to spring back after a movement is complete. Move your fingers and watch the synchrony of your knuckle movements. In order to move, muscles must contract. The contractile parts of muscles are the proteins actin and myosin. When these proteins are stimulated by a nerve impulse, they slide across each other, causing a shortening of the muscle cell. Upon stimulation, multiple muscle cells shorten at the same time, resulting in muscle contraction. Although proteins are found in the greatest amounts in connective tissues such as bone, their most extraordinary function is as enzymes. Enzymes are proteins that conduct specific chemical reactions. An enzyme's job is to provide a site for a chemical reaction and to lower the amount of energy and time it takes for that chemical reaction to happen. On average, more than 100 chemical reactions occur in cells every single second, and most of them require enzymes. The liver alone contains over 1,000 enzyme systems. Enzymes are specific and will use only particular substrates that fit into their active site, similar to the way a lock can be opened only with a specific key. Nearly every chemical reaction requires a specific enzyme. All bodily functions, including the breakdown of nutrients in the stomach and small intestine, the transformation of nutrients into molecules a cell can use, and building all macromolecules, including protein itself, involves enzymes. Proteins are responsible for the production of hormones. Recall that hormones are the chemical messages produced by the endocrine glands. When an endocrine gland is stimulated, it releases a hormone. That hormone is then transported into the blood to its target cell, where it communicates a message to initiate a specific reaction or cellular process. For instance, after you eat a meal, your blood glucose levels rise. In response to the increased blood glucose, the pancreas releases the hormone insulin. A major function of hormones is to turn enzymes on and off, so some proteins can even regulate the actions of other proteins. While not all hormones are made from proteins, many of them are. Proper protein intake enables the basic biological processes of the body to maintain the status quo in a changing environment. Fluid balance refers to maintaining the distribution of water in the body. If too much water in the blood suddenly moves into a tissue, the results are swelling and potentially cell death. Water always flows from an area of high concentration to one of a low concentration. To keep the water evenly distributed between blood and cells, proteins continuously circulate at high concentrations in the blood. The most abundant protein in blood is the butterfly-shaped protein known as albumin. Albumin's presence in the blood makes the protein concentration in the blood similar to that in the cells. Therefore, fluid exchange between the blood and cells is not in the extreme, but rather is minimized to preserve the status quo. Protein is also essential in maintaining proper pH balance. This is the measure of how acidic or basic a substance is in the blood. Blood pH is maintained between 7.35 and 7.45, which is slightly basic. Even a slight change in blood pH can affect body functions. Recall that acidic conditions can cause protein denaturation, which stops proteins from functioning. The body has several systems that hold the blood pH within the normal range to prevent this from happening. One of these is the circulating albumin. Albumin is slightly acidic, and because it's negatively charged, it balances the many positively charged molecules, such as hydrogen protons, calcium, potassium, and magnesium, which are also circulating in the blood. Albumin acts as a buffer against abrupt changes in the concentrations of these molecules, thereby balancing blood pH and maintaining the status quo. The protein hemoglobin also participates in acid-base balance by binding hydrogen protons. Albumin and hemoglobin also play a role in molecular transport. Albumin chemically binds to hormones, fatty acids, some vitamins, essential minerals, and drugs, and transports them through the circulatory system. Each red blood cell contains millions of hemoglobin molecules that bind oxygen in the lungs and transport it to all the tissues in the body. A cell's plasma membrane is usually not permeable to large polar molecules, so to get the required nutrients and molecules into the cell, many transport proteins exist in the cell membrane. Some of these proteins are channels that allow particular molecules to move in and out of cells. Others act as one-way taxis and require energy to function. Earlier, we discussed that the strong collagen fibers in skin provide it with structure and support. The skin's dense network of collagen fibers also serves as a barricade against harmful substances. The immune system's attack and destroy functions are dependent on enzymes and antibodies, which are also proteins. An enzyme called lysozyme is secreted in the saliva and attacks the walls of bacteria, causing them to rupture. Certain proteins circulating in the blood can be directed to build a molecular knife that stabs the cellular membranes of foreign invaders. The antibodies secreted by the white blood cells survey the entire circulatory system looking for harmful bacteria and viruses to surround and destroy. Antibodies also trigger other factors in the immune system to seek and destroy unwanted intruders. Some of the amino acids in proteins can be disassembled and used to make energy. Only about 10% of dietary proteins are catabolized each day to make cellular energy. The liver is able to break down amino acids to the carbon skeleton, which can then be fed into the citric acid cycle. This is similar to the way that glucose is used to make ATP. If a person's diet doesn't contain enough carbohydrates and fats, their body will use more amino acids to make energy, which compromises the synthesis of new proteins and destroys muscle proteins. Alternatively, if a person's diet contains more protein than the body needs, the extra amino acids will be broken down and transformed into fat. A healthy diet incorporates all nutrients in moderation. Low protein intake has several health consequences, and a severe lack of protein in the diet eventually causes death. Although severe protein deficiency is rare in the developed world, it's a leading cause of death in children and in many poor, underdeveloped countries. There are health consequences of too much protein. Typically, diets high in protein are considered as those that derive more than 30% of the total calories from protein. Many people follow high protein diets because marketers tout protein's ability to stimulate weight loss. While it's true that following a high-protein diet can result in weight loss in some people, this tends to be a short-term effect, and the long-term effects tend to outweigh the benefits. There's a scientific hypothesis that there may be health consequences of remaining on high-protein diets for the long term, but clinical trials are ongoing or scheduled to examine this hypothesis further. As the high-protein diet trend arose, so did the intensely debated issue of whether there are any health consequences of eating too much protein. Observational studies conducted in the general population suggest that diets high in animal protein specifically, and specifically those in which the primary protein source is red meat, are linked to a higher risk for kidney stones, kidney disease, liver malfunction, colorectal cancer, osteoporosis, and gout. The long-term health consequences of high-protein diets haven't been adequately studied. As with any nutrient, protein must be eaten in proper amounts. Moderation and variety are key strategies to achieving a healthy diet and need to be considered when optimizing protein intake. While the scientific community continues its debate about the particulars regarding the health consequences of too much protein in the diet, you may be wondering just how much protein you should consume to be healthy. Please note on this table what the guidelines are for adequate protein intake in grams per day and percentage of calories per day. Read through the next few slides on calculating protein needs. Please note on this slide that for healthy adults, the amount of protein determined adequate is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. The IOM used data from multiple studies that determined nitrogen balance in people of different age groups to calculate the RDA for protein. A person is said to be in nitrogen balance when the nitrogen input equals the amount of nitrogen used and excreted. A person is in negative nitrogen balance when the amount of excreted nitrogen is greater than that consumed, meaning that the body is breaking down more protein to meet its demands. This state of imbalance can occur in people who have certain diseases, such as cancer or muscular dystrophy. Someone who has a low protein diet may also be in negative nitrogen balance as they're taking in less protein than what they actually need. Positive nitrogen balance occurs when a person excretes less nitrogen than what is taken in by the diet, such as during child growth or pregnancy. At these times, the body requires more protein to build new tissues, so more of what gets consumed gets used up and less nitrogen is excreted. A person healing from a severe wound may also be in positive nitrogen balance because protein is being used up to repair tissues. While all foods contain some dietary protein, the protein food group that consists of the most is made from meat, seafood, poultry, eggs, soy, beans, peas, and seeds. Seafood is considered a high-protein food, but it often contains some healthy fats, while plant sources of protein contain a high amount of fiber, which is very beneficial to the body. Some animal-based protein foods have an unhealthy amount of saturated fat and cholesterol. So when choosing your dietary sources of protein, it's important to take note of the other nutrients and also the non-nutrients, such as cholesterol, food dyes, added preservatives, etc., in order to make good selections that will benefit your health. Recall of the 20 amino acids, 9 of them are essential amino acids that we must get in from the diet. A food that contains all 9 essential amino acids is considered a complete protein source, while a food that doesn't contain all 9 is called an incomplete protein source. Complete proteins generally come from animal foods, but some plant foods also are complete proteins, such as soy, quinoa, and some of your sea vegetables. The animal-based protein that's not a complete protein is gelatin. Many plant-based foods are deficient in at least one of the 9 essential amino acids, so therefore they're considered incomplete protein sources. But by mixing incomplete proteins, you get a complete protein. These are often called complementary foods because when you eat them together, they contain all essential 9 amino acids and at adequate levels. The second component of protein quality is digestibility, as not all protein sources are equally digested. In general, animal-based proteins are completely broken down during the process of digestion, whereas plant-based proteins are not. This is because some proteins are contained in the plant's fibrous cell walls, and these pass through the digestive tract unabsorbed by the body. The PDCAAS is a method adopted by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to determine a food's protein quality. It's calculated using a formula that incorporates the total amount of amino acids in the food and the amount of protein in the food that's actually digested by humans. The food's protein quality is then ranked against the food's highest in protein quality. Milk protein, egg whites, whey, and soy all have a ranking of 1, the highest ranking. Read through the next few slides on protein needs, special considerations. Vegetarians and vegans can attain their recommended protein intake if they just give a little more attention to high-quality plant-based protein sources. Since many vegans and vegetarians may worry that they don't get enough protein in, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee has analyzed how 3 different plant-based dietary patterns can meet the recommended dietary guidelines for all nutrients. They define these diets in the following manner. Plant-based, which means 50% of the protein is obtained from plant foods. Lacto-ovo-vegetarian, where all animal products except eggs and dairy are eliminated. And vegan, and this is where all animal products are eliminated. From these analyses, what they concluded was that the plant-based, lacto-ovo-vegetarian, and vegan diets do not significantly affect nutrient adequacy. They also stated that people who choose to obtain protein solely from plants should include foods fortified with vitamins B12, D, and calcium. Other nutrients of concern may be omega-3 fatty acids and choline. Another thing to note is that 2 large observational studies with thousands of participants demonstrated that in comparison to regular meat eaters, people who followed a vegetarian diet had a significantly decreased risk of dying from heart disease or cancer. As we age, we begin to lose muscle tissue. This is a process referred to as sarcopenia. A person with sarcopenia has significantly lower than the average value for a healthy person of the same age of their muscle tissue. This is associated with weakness, movement disorders, and a generally poor quality of life. It's estimated that about half the U.S. population of men and women above the age of 80 are sarcopenic. A review published in the September 2010 issue of Clinical Intervention in Aging showed that higher intakes of protein from high-quality sources may prevent aging adults from becoming sarcopenic. Currently, the RDA for protein for elderly persons is the same as that for the rest of the adult population, but there are several clinical trials underway focusing on determining the amount of protein in the diet that prevents the significant loss of muscle mass, specifically in older adults. Muscle tissue is rich in protein composition and has a very high turnover rate. During exercise, especially when it's performed for longer than 2 to 3 hours, muscle tissue will be broken down and some of the amino acids are catabolized to fuel muscle contraction. To avoid excessive borrowing of amino acids from muscle tissue to synthesize energy during prolonged exercise, protein needs to be obtained from the diet. Bear in mind, though, that we're talking about very intense activity lasting for more than 2 to 3 hours. The body requires protein post-exercise to accomplish this. The IOM does not set different RDAs for protein intakes for athletes, but the AND, the American College of Sports Medicine, and Dietitians of Canada have the following position statements. Nitrogen balance studies suggest that dietary protein intake necessary to support nitrogen balance in endurance athletes ranges from 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Recommended protein intakes for strength-trained athletes range from approximately 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of weight per day. There's general scientific agreement that endurance and strength athletes should consume protein from high-quality sources, such as dairy, eggs, lean meats, or soy. However, eating an excessive amount of protein at one time doesn't further stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Many exercisers and athletes feel like they need to take a protein shake after performance or after weightlifting. While nutrition experts recommend that athletes do consume some protein within an hour after exercise, they also recommend that you consume carbohydrates and water as well. What is important is the ratio, not that you just take in a bunch of protein. The recommended ratio from nutrition experts for exercise recovery foods is 4 grams of carbohydrates for every gram of protein. So it's the ratio that's important. So what about protein supplements? Protein supplements include powders made from compounds such as whey or soy and amino acids that either come as a powder form or in capsules. We've noted that the protein requirements for most people, even those that are active, isn't that high. So is taking a protein supplement ever justified? Neither protein nor amino acid supplements have been scientifically proven to improve exercise performance or increase strength. In addition, the average American already consumes more protein than is required. Despite these facts, many highly physically active individuals still use protein or amino acid supplements. According to the American College of Sports Medicine and Dietitians of Canada, the current evidence indicates that protein and amino acid supplements are no more or no less effective than food when energy is adequate for gaining lean body mass. The general consensus is that high-quality protein foods are a much better and cheaper source for branched-chain amino acids, and that a chicken breast contains the equivalent of 7 times the amount of branched-chain amino acids as one supplement tablet. This means if you're interested in enhancing exercise performance or building muscle, you don't need to support the $20 billion supplement industry. Just choose high-quality protein foods. Proteins in a nutshell. Proteins are long chains of amino acids folded into precise structures that determine their functions, which are in the tens of thousands. They're the primary construction materials of the body, serving as building blocks for bone, skin, hair, muscle, hormones, and antibodies. Without them, we can't break down or build macromolecules, grow, or even heal from a wound. Eat proteins in moderation, at least 10% of the calories you take in and not more than 35%. Too little protein impairs bodily functions, and too much can lead to chronic disease. More complete sources are in animal-based foods, but choose those low in saturated fat and cholesterol. Some plant-based foods are also complete protein sources and don't add much to your saturated fat or cholesterol intake. Incomplete protein sources can easily be combined in the daily diet and provide all of the essential amino acids at adequate levels. Growing children and the elderly need to ensure they get enough protein in their diet to help build and maintain muscle strength. Even if you're a hardcore athlete, get your proteins from nutrient-dense foods, as you need more than just protein to power up for an event. Nuts are one nutrient-dense food with a whole lot of protein. 1 ounce of pistachios, which is about 50 nuts, has the same amount of protein as an egg and contains a lot of vitamins, minerals, healthy polyunsaturated fats, and antioxidants. Moreover, the FDA says that eating 1 ounce of nuts per day can lower your risk for heart disease. Can you be a hardcore athlete and a vegetarian? Many Olympians are vegetarians. Figure skater Charlene Wong, sprinter Leroy Borrell, hurdler Edwin Moses, and Carl Lewis, who won 10 medals, 9 of them gold, in track and field. And don't forget about Venus and Serena Williams, or Tom Brady. The analysis of vegetarian diets by the DGAC didn't find that they were inadequate in any nutrients, but did state that people who obtain proteins solely from plants should make sure they consume foods with vitamin B12, vitamin D, calcium, omega-3 fatty acids, and choline. Iron and zinc may also be of concern, especially for female athletes. Being a vegetarian athlete requires that you pay more attention to what you eat. However, this is also a true statement for all athletes.